Welcome back to Inside City Hall. Earlier this month, my next two guests published a scathing critique of the Bloomberg administration, saying in part that the perception of the mayor as an innovative leader is a myth. And they say that the myth, which they call the Bloomberg bubble, recently burst when City Hall found itself unprepared to handle the blizzard that buried the city under mounds of snow last December. Here to discuss what they see as a first draft of telling the true history of the Bloomberg administration are Fred Siegel and Sol Stern. They are both senior fellows at the Manhattan Institute. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. Let me start with you, Fred. You're saying that the mayor's reputation is, as a reformer and as someone above the political fray, is basically undeserved. Is it overstated, or is it just sort of non-existent?
I think it's mostly just undeserved. The key thing here is people have a sense that Bloomberg is a reformer because he didn't take money from the ordinary interest groups. Well, what he did was reverse the flow of money. Rather than the interest groups buying the politician, he bought the interest groups. So the corrupt relationship between interest groups and the city, the mismanagement between the interest groups and the city, continued. Just the flow of money changed directions.
We'll talk about unions in a minute. What other special interest groups are you talking about?
Well, enormous increase in the number of contractors who work for the city with no accountability, contracts that bypass the usual mechanisms. And one thing that hasn't been talked about enough, and this is subsidies. The city went crazy with subsidies. It's over $1 billion between Yankee Stadium and Atlantic Yards. In the case of Yankee Stadium, we don't really need to subsidize Alex Rodriguez. And in the case of Atlantic Yards, we subsidized the Atlantic Yards development at a time when Brooklyn was booming with building projects. You could the space next to the Brooklyn House Detention had a luxury condo going up. So why are you spending public money? So the idea that he was a careful steward of the public's money is really not true.
And Sol, nowhere is that more true, according to you guys in your article, than when it comes to the school system.
Absolutely, because the mayor billed himself as the education mayor with a huge and a very effective, I should say, public relations machine, to some extent pumped up with taxpayer dollars and his own private money. He was successful for many, many years in projecting himself as the great education reformer in the country, bar none. He testified in Congress at a congressional committee that he had reduced the black-white achievement gap, something that's been befuddling education reformers for decades. He did that in 4 years by 1/2. It was all built on fraudulent statistics and basically fraudulent test scores that the state education department last year admitted was in fact the case. So just as the handling of the snowstorm in December punctured the myth of Bloomberg as the great manager, handling emergencies and everything else well. So earlier that year, actually, when the state education department admitted that all the increase in test scores over the past 2 years was just completely empty, and when they actually gave a test that tested the entire curriculum, all the gains came falling down. So that was the other side of another case like the snowstorm.
Is the problem, Sol, that the city didn't get what we paid for? Because you document basically 70%, if you adjust for inflation, 70% increase in the education budget from the time he took office until the most recent.
Yeah, even if you posited that there were some gains, let's say, I think it was basically flat, maybe a few gains, but even if you gave him credit for more than that, the question is a cost-benefit analysis that you have to ask in every aspect of government. What did we get and what did we pay for? The fact is, after promising in 2003, and when he rolled out his education reforms, after promising that he and his chancellor were going to be able to do a good job with only $12 billion because they were going to bring in efficiency. In fact, he raised the education budget. No one pushed them to do this. He raised it from 12 billion to 21 billion. 12 billion to 21 billion in 7 years. I believe that's the largest increase in spending on education of any school district in the country. What did we get for it? What did we get? Graduation rates the number of kids actually college ready, it's not gone up. The test scores are flat. So what was the what we got? What
but
did we
I mean,
get?
I associate you, Sol, as both an author and as a leader of the education reform movement for a long, long time. And you all embraced the mayor, at least early on, as
I
somebody
did.
who was going to carry the flag. Now,
Sure.
does this mean that some of the reform ideas just didn't pan out, or is there something else?
Well, some of them were the wrong, as far as I'm concerned. It was a reform ideas, and you're right. I cheered the mayoral control just like most others, and my friend Diane Ravitch, who's a big opponent of the education department, also supported the idea of mayoral control. We believed him. I believed him. I wrote an article saying that's great when he announced we're gonna run the schools with that $12 million, or maybe just an inflation increase. And we're going to go back to basics on curriculum, institute instructional programs that actually have been shown to work. He did neither. He raised the budget. He himself created this terrible problem of overinflated pensions. He gave out these huge across the board raises to teachers, 43%. We didn't get anything better in terms of education. What he got out of that was improving his image, because he in effect bought off the union politically.